So Bloom has gotten rid of McCoy. He's eager to get to this letter from Martha Clifford. But first he notices that there's this play that's going to be playing soon. It's called Leia the Forsaken. He remembers this was a play that his father knew and that his father would quote and mention and say, the meaning of this play is so profound. And the part that he specifically quotes, he's talking about a character who has left the house of his father and the God of his father. And you may not understand what that means at this point, but remember, Bloom's father, or maybe you don't remember, but I think I mentioned it, that his father is converted from Judaism to Catholicism to marry Bloom's mother. So maybe that resonates with Bloom's father a little. And also, we get this more hints about what happened to Bloom's father. He killed himself when Bloom was pretty young. We're going to learn that more explicitly in the next chapter. Let's start to look at the letter itself now that Bloom gets. First, Bloom is kind of worried. He's like, did I go too far last time and flirt too much with her? But as he opens the letter, there's a flower in there, and he realizes pretty quickly that no, he did not go too far, and that she is actually flirting pretty heavily with him. She pretends to be a little insulted by his flirtations, but clearly that is not the case. And furthermore, at the end of her letter, we learn that she is well aware that he is a married man. So keep this in mind as Bloom is feeling his feelings of torture throughout the day at Molly's affair, and ask yourself just how innocent is he himself. The style of the letter is somewhat poorly written, and I kind of get the impression that Joyce had fun writing it, that he was kind of dumbing down his text, and that he liked it so much that he does it later on in the Nausicaa chapter for a whole chapter. But it's somewhat poorly written. There is an error. The woman, Martha, or whoever it is, she, instead of using the word, she accidentally says world. So the sentence reads, I do not like that other world. And it's something that you may think is a typo in the book itself, but it's actually her typo in the letter. And Bloom will notice the typo and comment on it eventually. After he gets through the letter, Bloom walks along and he comes to a church. And he looks at the church and he thinks about it. And then he's pulled into the church almost magically. Here's the line: "The cold smell of sacred stone called him." And it's kind of curious, why does Bloom go into this church? I was thinking about this because he goes on for a few pages really analyzing the church procedures that are happening, and he does it in a very cynical way, very dissecting and analyzing and seeing, this is what they're doing here to extract as much money as possible from people. So he's very cynical. On the other hand, while that gives Joyce the opportunity of mocking the religion and, or maybe not the religion, the church, I think underneath that there is this sense of joy and appreciation of spirituality that Joyce is looking at. He praises the music and the hymns, or not the hymns, I don't remember, but he praises, I remember, Mozart and Mercadante and Palestrina, saying that that really moves the spirit, or something like that. And I think that's what Joyce is trying to show, is that yes, there is this Lotus Eater aspect to it, but also underneath that there is a spirituality that Bloom and Joyce can also appreciate. Before the plate can be passed around to donate some money, Bloom decides to leave. So even though people may view him as a cheap Jew like stereotype, there is some truth to that. I mean, Joyce is not going to make him like totally, he's going to break out of that stereotype a little, but he's also going to show that there's some truth to it. So whatever. He goes next to Sweeney's, which is a chemist shop, or we would call it maybe a pharmacy in the US. And this is a place that still exists. You can go in there, and it's, I don't know if it's a full-on pharmacy or what it is now, but it's mainly really a tourist destination for people who are interested in James Joyce. It's one of the better ones, I think, and if you're in Dublin, definitely check it out. I think they sell the soap that Bloom buys when he's there. I think they sell copies of Joyce's books. I know that they do reading groups, or at least they were doing them, for Ulysses, Finnegan's Wake, and other James Joyce books. So if you're in Dublin, check it out. Why is Bloom here? He's getting some lotion for Molly that she is going to have prepared. So he reminds the pharmacist what the lotion was made of, and then they look it up in a book or something. And then Bloom wants some soap, so he buys some lemony soap, I believe, for his bath that he's going to be going between chapters, the Lotus Eaters and Hades. He takes a bath. So he gets that soap, and he says, oh, I'll come back later for the lotion, because they have to prepare it, like chemists. And they say, okay, well, you can pay later and come back later. But if I remember correctly, he doesn't come back later. He forgets, like the latchkey. And so he's not totally, he's a smart guy, but he's kind of forgetful in some ways. Bloom steps out of the chemist and runs into this guy, Bantam Lyons. We've seen him before in, I believe, Ivy Day in the committee room, a minor character. Anyways, Lyons is, I wouldn't call him a friend of Bloom, more of an acquaintance. And when he sees Bloom has a newspaper, he's like, oh, let me look at your newspaper for a second. And Bloom's like, okay, take it. Lyons is going to be looking up information about this horse race that's happening that day, June 16th, 1904, a real horse race that happened in real life. And it's called the Ascot Gold Cup, I believe. Anyways, he wants to see the names of the horses or something. Bloom just wants to get rid of him, so he's like, hey, you can take the nice newspaper. But actually the words that he uses are, I was just going to throw it away. So Lyons is looking at the newspaper, and as he's looking at the horses, there happens to be a horse called Throwaway. And this is a real horse. So he looks at it, he hears Bloom say Throwaway, and he thinks, hey, you know what, I'm going to bet on Throwaway. We don't realize, though, this because Joyce doesn't tell us any of this until like a few hundred pages later in Cyclops. We'll get to it. But for now, I'm telling you in advance, that's what's going on here. Lyons is confused. Bloom has no idea there's a horse called Throwaway. He knows nothing about the horse race. It's just two different, I mentioned before, reality tunnels or diverging paths. The Lotus Eaters is going to end with Bloom imagining that Turkish bath that he's just about to visit. And here's how it ends. His navel, bud of flesh, and saw the dark tangled curls of his bush floating hair of the stream around the limp father of thousands, a languid, floating flower. And if that wasn't clear, Bloom is imagining his penis after he's masturbated and the sperm are floating in the water. I think this is one of the examples in this book, maybe one of the first, of something I've kind of alluded to maybe about scale. And what I mean by that is that humans interact at this level of humans, like we deal with other humans and think of things in terms of humanity. But I think what Joyce really shows in the book is that there are tons of levels of scale in the book and in reality. And so you think about the scale of the city itself, that's one level of scale. Or you can go to the planet itself, or to the solar system, or the universe. You can go pretty high up. Anyways, and then there's also the other way. You can go down to the level of his sperm. You can go to molecular level, atomic level. And all these levels are operating at the same time. And Joyce, he was aware of biology, physics, chemistry. I'm not saying he was like totally competent to do like the understand general relativity, but he knew enough about biology to get into medical school. So he'd taken these classes and he was aware of the current level of scientific knowledge, and incorporating that into the book I think is just fascinating. I love that. I want to recommend a quick book I just reread. It's a comic called The Filth, and it deals with these similar issues of scale that are all around us. Anyhow, I am done with Lotus Eaters. I will see you in Hades.